All right, hi everyone. Let's get started with part 2 of A Black Body Is. Again, my name is Michael Amanì, or Amanì Michael, whichever you want to use. And I'm here with Intuit Hugh, trying to hold space today to talk about the question of what a black body is and how we can understand it in the context of it being a political, social, and personal construct. So before I get started, again, I'm going to just make sure that the URL is posted so that we can make sure everybody gets engaged. Let's see, 1 second. And also, thank you for being patient. I'm trying to learn how to broadcast through YouTube Live, so we'll learn and it'll get smoother as it goes. Okay, so let's go ahead and reset. Okay, so just to revisit where we're coming from. So in the first part of this series, in A Black Body Is, we talked about a black body as observing, and we talked about what kinds of things we are learning from recent events and asking some questions about how we navigate that space, how we navigate conversations, how we engage in language, and what kind of stories we're telling about these events. And I was sharing a little bit about, or a lot, about how I was understanding a lot of these things as not exceptional, not particularly interesting, not novel, and trying to place them in a historical context, trying to place them on a timeline to understand that they began at a certain point and have continued to develop over that time, that they're not something that just appeared out of nowhere. So we visited some questions like how people are talking about Charlottesville right now, how people are talking about policing and police brutality, and honestly don't like that phrase because I feel policing is an institution of brutality inherently. But we talked about policing, we talked about Trump just a little bit. We heard some quotes from Trump, a mayor, and also John McCain, and we looked at some quotes and articles talking about racism and how we're contextualizing that right now. So we're coming from a place of observing what events are taking place and trying to observe also some of the things that are happening in between. And let me make sure I keep the live chat visible. And coming from a place of observing how so many of us are saying right now, I'm not a racist, I'm not a Nazi, I'm not this, I'm not a white nationalist, I don't want to be associated with this display of this is disgusting. That's where we're coming from. And trying to understand how these daily violences are ignored or not understood or not acknowledged, and then we see major events coming up that put these things on display and how we understand those things. So we're coming from a place of observing, we're coming from a place of thinking about the black body as observing. And in opening this next space in part 2, I'd like to look at the black body as dreaming. And when I started trying to set this up and I started thinking about, what do I want to share, what I want to explore, what I want to hold space for, I wanted to name it as healing. I wanted to say a black body is healing. But on one hand, I'm noticing, observing is also a form of healing. We have to understand where we're coming from and what's moving around and within us. We have to be able to observe ourselves and reflect. But then secondly, I didn't want to name the second part healing because I'm thinking, what are we healing towards? What's the ideal state? What's the ideal affirmation of our existence? How do we understand what needs to be affirmed in Black experience? And I'm also speaking a lot to questions that I think relate to Indigenous experience. I do not identify as Indigenous myself. That's not part of my experience that I know of. And I don't want to speak over anyone. So if there's anyone here who does identify as Indigenous and feels that I'm taking up too much space regarding something or just misconstruing something, please let me know. I would love to be accountable for the words that I'm sharing, because these are political words and they do have consequences on others' bodies. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I do feel that a lot of what I'm speaking on has relevance to Black and Indigenous experience in particular. And as I've thought on these things, I just notice how we seem to be constantly in a process of healing. So much that naming something healing almost feels unnecessary or redundant or irrelevant. Like, it's just not the center of the question. So trying to just hold some space to look at different places of healing, to look at different movements of healing, to look at different places of dreaming and movements of dreaming, and see what we can engage from there. So if you're watching this and you identify as Black and Indigenous especially, I'm not centering white folks and folks of particular different privileges that may distract from some of the questions we're asking here right now. I'm particularly interested in Black and Indigenous folks sharing in this space to be able to dream of something different for ourselves. So if you identify as either of those identities and experiences, then please definitely engage in this process. This is for you. This is why I'm holding this space. It's for you and it's for me. And if you don't identify as either of those things, then please connect us with someone who does and tell them that this resource is available, that we're holding space to just be processing together and witnessing each other. So that's what this space is for, just to let you know the intention of the space. And yeah, I have a number of things that I'd like to talk about here, but this space isn't just for me, so I encourage you to bring in things that are meaningful to your experience too. And we'll just handle it casually. We'll take up as much space as we need, and we'll dream together. So that's what we're doing. And it seems there's a comment. Antoine, let's read. So I'm just going to read this live. If you're posting in the public chat, I will read it with your name. If you have questions or thoughts that you want to share privately, please send them via Facebook message privately or to the Into It Hue page. And that way you won't be named if you feel uncomfortable with that. So Antoine says, I've been observing a lot of horrific events in the past few years. The tension has always been here, but we must try to find peace as POC. We cannot let evil win. I hear that. Yeah, I think I've been coming into my consciousness and identifying within myself as Black for probably 3 or 4 years. It has not always been my experience. Some of you may be like what? Like, obviously, like, obviously you're not just white, or obviously, like, that's part of your experience. But for me, it took a long time to acknowledge the fullness of that. I remember one of my parents would try to share with me about how my experience was different, like, don't go walking around at this time of night because just be mindful. And as I just shared in part one, like, now that's obviously part of my experience that I'm extremely aware of. And when I first experienced that, from my parent, I was like, you're just trying to limit me, like, you don't want me to live, or you're thinking like backwards, you're stuck in time or something. I really didn't have any appreciation for it. And over the past few years, like, I've really allowed myself space to observe some of these truths, and now I'm dreaming. That's why I'm here, and just trying to contextualize my experience some more. I would definitely say, yeah, the tension has always been here, and yeah, we do have to try to find peace as POC, and I want to hold space for, like, what I'm thinking of right now is asking questions of what kind of healing, what kind of dreaming, what kind of thriving could exist for us. Not just these events of, like, things that we know and then people say, oh, this is so bad and this is horrific and I'm so sorry. No, beyond sorry, beyond work also. What kinds of things do we dream of for ourselves? What kind of things respond to our experience in meaningful ways and allow us to feel supported and inspired, not to just survive. I feel like a lot of times in Black experience we are envisioning a way to just survive and not asking so much about how do we thrive. I just paused a second there because it reminded me of something I have in my notes. But if you're watching and you have commentary on things that have been really healing for you through seeing these events or through daily events that of violence that you've been experiencing, please share. I'm going to share some things that have been part of my experience and ways that I see our communities, plural communities, moving towards dreaming. So that's what this space is for. I'm going to check messages just to be sure. Okay, so the first place I want to start is with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And I think I've already spoken on this a little bit just now, but trying to contextualize what we're saying. These hashtags are particularly interesting as a linguistic phenomenon because they are sort of a packaged set of ideologies that can be easily shared and spread and traced also. So I feel like a lot of times they represent what a set of cultures most values, what a set of cultures thinks is most worth spreading around. I could start my own hashtag right now, but maybe it doesn't explode in the way that Black Lives Matter does. But so I'm seeing that we have Black Lives Matter, and I'm seeing that as a form of dream, a form of dreaming. So to deconstruct that a little bit, we're saying we dream of Black Lives mattering. We dream that Black Lives Matter. And when I think of that, I notice that we're asking for our lives to matter, but not that we're asking for thriving. And that's not to dismiss the incredible work that Black Lives Matter has done at all. No dismissing. It's not a critique of like, oh, we shouldn't engage that, we shouldn't be using that. But I'm just asking where are we currently in our consciousness, and what are we asking for? What are we saying that we deserve for ourselves? And right now I'm seeing that we have Black Lives Matter, so we're asking for our lives to matter. But I think life is obviously a lot more than that. One of the places that I started to think about this question more was actually from I don't know how to contextualize this person. I met this person named Sil. Sil is dope. Sil does philosophy work, or did philosophy work at UNC Chapel Hill, and now is writing incredible essays on. So that there's let me just slow down. There's two siblings. Their names are Af and Sil Ko, and they are working on a collection of essays. They title their site and their work as Afroism, Essays on Pop Culture, Feminism, and Black Veganism. And honestly, it's some of the most inspiring work that I've ever engaged. Like, when I've experienced it, I really have to like work with it, then step back, and then come back to it. And each time I come back to it, there's something evolved about my ability to engage it and my consciousness. So I'm really extremely thankful for their work. And at a certain point, they shared the same thought on Black Lives Matter, and how I wish it were still. I tried to get a copy of the book, and I intend to get one because I want to support this incredible work from Black femmes. I don't know if either of them identify as queer, but they're absolutely queer in the work that they do. It's incredibly deconstructive and incredibly radical and reclaiming and liberatory. So absolutely and totally recommend engaging their work. I'll post a link below so you can also purchase it if you have access to those resources. But in one of the things that they used to have posted, they talked about this idea of just surviving, or just getting by, or just literally just asking for our bodies to not be violated, and how minimal that is, how that's not dreaming, how that's just a part of the experience that we can be having as Black communities, that we can really aspire for more and that we can create more for ourselves. And so they suggested the phrase, or at least looked at the phrase, Black Life Matters. And I love that. That's the most simple way to put it. But I really resonate with and appreciate what that does, what that language does. Black Life Matters. I think we see people saying Black Life Matters when we see things like Black Girl Magic, when we see Black Excellence. You see things like this, though they may have their different limitations, with Black Excellence being a form of dreaming of success in maybe academic or career-oriented ways, which may be traditionally very limiting, but just different forms of dreaming that people are doing. And when I first engaged this, I was really just like shocked at how I hadn't processed this question before, how I hadn't realized what we were really saying when we say Black Lives Matter, and how really the question is not whether our bodies individually matter. Black lives means Black bodies, because that's when we talk about it. That's when we're talking about lives, is we're talking about something we witnessed in a video, when we've witnessed some sort of violence. But when are we talking about Black life? Do we culturally in the United States even know what Black life means? Do we have ideas? Do we have images? Do we have media of Black thriving? My thought right now is that no, we don't. We don't have anything close to incredible and consistent and inspiring and abundant works showing us models for how to thrive as communities, to thrive as individuals. So I was really interested in this question, and I think that sort of set the foundation for what kind of questions I'm asking. How do we how do we dream of something more? How do I dream of not, for my life, how do I dream of something beyond not being killed? Because I deserve more than not being killed. I deserve to thrive. I deserve a full experience. I deserve liberation. I deserve self-liberation. So how can I ask some of those questions? There's another comment. Antoine says, spreading awareness helps me find peace and healing. Educating open-minded white people on their privilege makes me feel at ease. So you find that healing for you. I find spreading awareness to be healing as well. In my experience, I've had difficulty with that at times because I've found that people are not always prepared or ready to use the skills and experiences that I'm sharing with them in a way that I feel is for my liberation. So a lot of times I feel that I am doing community service, and sometimes I just do it, but other times I understand that it's community service and that I also am doing a lot of emotional and mental labor, and that's actually part of what I want to talk about here, so I guess just transition right in. For me, that question has turned into a question about reparations. If you don't know about reparations, reparations is a set of movements that are working. This is my understanding of it. So if you don't identify with it and you're doing reparations work, please contribute. Let me know how you're understanding it if I'm missing things. I understand reparations work as an effort to reclaim the resources that have been historically extracted from Black and Indigenous folks. I think a lot of times people are no, I think it's pretty widely applied to Black and Indigenous folks, but a lot of times people are understanding reparations as monetary, like literally give us our money back. Though obviously a critique on capitalism quickly shows that that has some problems as well. So a lot of times I'm seeing people in this work understanding reparations as more of an exchange of energy. So reparations work can be, yeah, PayPal me this, PayPal me my rent, PayPal me to let me buy a house, PayPal me this or that, you know, contribute to my work in a monetary way. But also, if I need a particular material good, can you provide that for me? If I need food, can you provide that for me? The answer is yes, you can. But are you going to? Reparations work can also ask for skill exchange. So, you know, I don't have a car for historic reasons. I don't have access to the resources to be able to have a car right now. And so someone will offer to give rides around particular places, or to watch kids, or to help someone with a resume, or to teach an artistic skill, or, you know, there's all types of things, teach computer programming, I don't know. So people are doing reparations work as all types of things, and you know, could you come do my laundry, could you do this, things that, there's all types of ways to engage reparations. So that's my introduction to reparations, and I see that as, for me, a really meaningful form of being able to engage others' awareness, but also like take care of myself. So literally, a lot of times, instead of doing that emotional and mental labor for free, which is what I can do in spaces like this, then, you know, not just because a lot of like privileged folks can come and watch this and engage it and just learn, and there's no investment of energy other than time. But my time is also going into it, so I do not receive anything in particular that supports my thriving directly. So a lot of times when folks have come to me and said, you know, I don't like your tone, or like, I wish you would explain this to me, or I just feel that you weren't really explaining this clearly, or I just don't understand, um, then I will respond to them by saying, you know, well, here's some things that I need. If you would like this to be an exchange rather than theft, historical theft, or community service, I'm not really feeling generous today because I'm feeling very exhausted. So actually, I can do an exchange. You can pay me. I'll send you an invoice for the time that I'm using to explain these concepts to you, and to engage you in these hurtful ways, or just to pull resources together for you, which you could have Googled yourself. You can pay me to do that. You can give me emotional or physical intimacy. You can teach me a skill. You can give me a ride. You can, you know, just asking for things that I literally need in my experience, and demanding that they be acknowledged. Because I think a lot of times people are, first of all, people think that reparations just means the government sends a big check for one time and, you know, it's settled. There's a lot of problems with that. There's a lot of problems with that understanding. The systems that keep Black folks and Indigenous folks from thriving, or work to make sure that they don't, are still in place. And they will still be in place even if we get a check for however many thousand or 100, I don't know. It would be, and on top of that, the disrespect of not having the violence legitimately be fully acknowledged. Trying to pull so many thoughts together, but yeah, I find that to be a solid way to just tell others what I need in exchange for my time and my skills and my energy that I've gained from having to work through all these challenges, and the resources that I don't have because they have an extra house, or because they have a boat, or because they have just money sitting in the bank, or because they had their student loans paid off when they graduated just as a gift from their family. You know, that's not my experience. And there's historical reasons why that's my experience. There's historical reasons why Black and Indigenous folks consistently do not have the resources that white folks have inherited from exploitation. I'm not going to explain them here because any Google search will reveal that very clearly. But what I'm trying to share here is the beauty of being able to ask for what's already ours. Literally, you can understand it this way. If someone walked into my room right now and snatched up my computer, and then 5 years later, you know, I'm engaging them, it's not going to be neutral. It's not neutral. So when they come and engage me and ask me, you know, can you explain these things, or can you do something generous for me? Can you? I want to understand why you're talking to me this way, or I want to understand why you're being so divisive. Do you understand? You know, I literally would not be thrilled. I wouldn't be excited to be especially emotionally generous in this space. So it's about literally naming violences and thefts that have occurred, and asking that they be acknowledged, and asking that they be accountable and responded to. And I've been doing that in my personal relationships, and I found it extremely healing and supportive for me to not feel like I'm just being taken from all the time, but to actually be able to have some of my needs affirmed and responded to. There's more comments. Antoine says, it can be exhausting sometimes as well. Yes, emotional labor. Reparations should be mandatory. Whites will be a minority in the future, so I feel that will happen. So, I don't want to talk just about white folks, but I will mention that even if white folks are individually a minority in numbers, in bodies, in separate, distinct individuals, the structures that hold these narratives in place will not shift from their original intention. unless we actively do that. So I just feel that we're going to have to do some really accountable and active and intentional work to achieve those things, even if numbers are shifting and proportions are changing. And it's also not just, it's literally not just white folks. Like, I think one dream that I have for other black folks is to be willing to ask for more and to know that it's owed to us and to know that we deserve more. This is not me shaming people and being like, it's the black community's fault for being in this situation. No, that's not at all what I'm saying. And I'm not at all interested in furthering those types of narratives. What I'm saying is to know that other potentials exist for us, and that the things that we're doing now make sense to the ways that we are trying to make sense of existing as we are right now. Like, we're doing what we need to do to make do, but we also can make do and thrive. And so I'm looking at I'm looking at questions of that. And I feel like I've observed, that's where we're coming from in part one, so that's what I'm going to continue on. I've observed that people of color of all sorts, some more than others, are very much interested and invested in and protecting and honoring and worshiping whiteness and white supremacist ideals and systems more than others. And so I would just ask us to, I'm asking myself to dream of that. Can I dream of a reality where I don't affirm a police officer's right to approach me and ask me to step outside of a car and come in the house and do this and that, like, and to be fearful because they have a gun and they, how can I imagine a reality where I'm not dreaming of only those potentials? I'm gonna take a drink real fast. My mouth is getting dry. I'll check Facebook. One second. Just take a second to breathe. Did I post a link on this? Yeah, I would love to hear, maybe this is a time people can share what kinds of things you're doing to to create dreams for yourself and to imagine something more, like what kind of future are you trying to see in the world? Okay. Lots of clicking. So reparations for me has been a form of dreaming, has been a form of shifting my understanding from anytime someone asks for my emotional and mental labor, I have to give it to them. If I want to be a good person and I want to be generous and I want to be compassionate, then I have to give it. I don't have to give it because actually it was already stolen from me. When someone engages me, they get upset if I say that I don't want to explain. Someone makes a comment and I'm like, that's problematic. And then they're like, why? And I'm like, I'm not explaining. Then I'm perceived as like a jerk or like arrogant or like divisive or unhelpful or just, all of these things, angry. And that's not the way it is because it's not neutral. When we enter in the space, which is the same as any majority-minority interaction, any marginalized and privileged interaction, the privileged space always feels that other things, other explanations, other work is automatically owed to them. So I think reparations has been a way of reclaiming part of that dream for myself and saying, well, if you want it to be honestly equal, if you want it to be honestly even, then how about you return some of these resources to me so that I can consent to the types of theft that have been occurring for years and years and years. And today. They happen today, always. So that's been a form of dreaming for me. I had a post from someone. One second. I don't want to center whiteness in this space, but I'm gonna, in case anyone's watching, I felt like this was an exceptional post, so I want to share this. So this is, I'm not gonna name the person because if for any reason, I don't want any violence to be traced back to them and like targeted. I don't want them to be targeted for anything, but just to center some work that white folks can do in dreaming on our behalf, and work that we can demand of them and others who are not working for our liberation actively. Yeah, I just want to share this. So this person wrote, and again, I'm going to censor any inappropriate language, not because I feel it's inappropriate, but because they're community guidelines. So just to note, those are some changes I'll be making here. But it says, white people calling out white supremacists with torches is not remarkable. That's the easy thing. They need to risk their inheritance by calling out their racist parents and grandparents. They need to donate their inheritance to black-run programs that help black women and kids. They need to scold and shun their close friends who gentrify neighborhoods. They need to stop effing black people while disrespecting or pretending to be and therefore displacing other black people. They need to stop going abroad and taking photos with poor black kids. They need to stop profiting off of black images and leave black folks to tell our own stories. They need to stop teaching in inner city schools where they feel like saviors or missionaries. They need to stop questioning black people's need to have all black spaces. They need to stop demanding that you're nice to them in order for them to not be violent with you. They need to stop listing the things they've done for black folks while a black person is trying to hold them accountable. They need to stop excusing their cousins who were just raised that way. They need to stop saying, I could never be racist, ignoring the worlds they've grown up in, which condition all white people to be racist, whether it's conscious or not. It's some of what I spoke on in the last video. They need to stop playing the music of black folks in their cars, but avoid being in spaces with black folks because it's sketchy. They need to stop entering black spaces asking, either explicitly or through hints, that their white bodies, ideas, and feelings be centered, and a host of other things. But they won't. I don't care how sad or guilty white people are about racial violence and anti-blackness if they aren't putting their lives, powers, resources on the line. Their guilt is a way to feel human while they benefit from the dehumanization of others. Stop rewarding people for easy. And then there's some language there. Stop rewarding people for easy work. That's what we'll say. So I just really resonated with this post because I think it pointed out, like, if white and other folks are honestly trying to say they're for our liberation, if they're trying to say Black Lives Matter, that Black life matters. I wrote a post on this the other day. What are you trying to give up? Because if you're not trying to give things up, then what you need to understand is that the things that you're holding on to, that you're trying to protect for your future and your investment, and I'm making intentional reference back to the things in the first video here. If you're not undoing that, then you're doing it. If you are not, as a white or other privileged person, instead of, have you given your job to a black person with the skills to do it? Have you gotten a second job to make sure that I can have my bills paid? Have you thought about giving me that house that your parents just have and were just able to give to you? Have you thought about giving me all of your clothes that you don't wear? Have you asked me if I have food in my fridge every week? Have you asked me, you know, I know that you have a passion for music, but you have those hours from privilege. You have those hours. We all have hours. We're all animal. We all move in the world in this way. But if you're going to engage in any political way, then you actually need to understand there's a reason why you had the hours to become proficient in violin. There's a certain lack of stress, there's a certain lack of challenge, and a certain lack of demanding context that permitted you to have and focus on the passions that you're so engaged in. So, actually, I know that that's your passion, but I also have passions. And can you reinvest in those, what was stolen from you? The thing is, most people are not going to do that. And so there's honestly no way to say I'm dreaming of your liberation if you're not willing to do these things. Because you can't dream of my liberation when my liberation is something that your existence is working against unless you're fighting it. So that's just a note. There's a reason why, there's allyship is very complex, and it requires, a true ally is someone who is willing to undo themselves, truly, to understand that your liberation, I don't know how to say it differently or more simply. If you are in a space of privilege, you literally, that part of your existence literally violates my liberation. Like, it limits it in very literal ways through my resources, through my emotional traumas, through my social experiences. Like, unless you're willing to undo that part of yourself, then I literally, like, you can't say that you're interested in my liberation. And it comes through giving things up because you didn't get them by accident. It was very intentional that you have them and that I don't. It's intentional that you have them and indigenous folks don't. So I'll leave with that. Let's see. Antoine says, dreaming of reparations is what helps me stay optimistic, and they can come from any forms instead of money, as you said. Yeah, I think a holistic way of understanding reparations is not just, I hear a lot of people critique it for, black capitalism is not any better. We're not trying to get everybody to have their own whatever products and consumption patterns they want. The point is, reparations can go a lot further, and we can accomplish deconstructing capitalism while we're deconstructing anti-blackness. And I feel like we have to. It's not a way to do just one or the other. So any holistic understanding of reparations, I feel, is really supportive, and I'm totally down for these skill exchange, energy exchange, community relationships. I love that. I'm all about that. So, yeah, I don't have more notes on things that I want to share, so, because I'm really just holding this space to make sure that while a lot of us are engaging current events right now and feeling very exhausted by that, or feeling like a lot of people are demanding our resources, or that we just have to, be more ready to deal with it than we honestly feel. Just giving us space to disengage and dream of something else. So I'm trying to leave that open, and yeah, I might just sit here and eat a little bit and let people share. Maybe we can talk a little bit about artwork. Is anyone watching? Christina, welcome. Computer works. Oh, you did say you've been without a computer, didn't you? It's not enough to stay out of it and stay quiet. This is from Antoine. It's not enough to stay out of it and stay quiet. I used to think that was how peace is attained, but creating that peace for me stole peace from others. I love this quote. Who is that from? It sounds almost like me, but I know that I didn't say that. Pretty sure, at least. Yeah, if there are Black or Indigenous folks in this space, like, please share with me ways that you're dreaming. Are you going to plays? Are you doing art? Are you engaging with Afrofuturism? Like, what kind of stuff is inspiring you to dream of a more full existence and thriving for yourself? Like, for me, one of the places that I've most found healing and like just different narratives, different ways, different potentials to exist has been in reading novels from mainly black femmes, especially queer black femmes. And I'm using queer again. It's not a reference to sexual orientation. I don't even believe in sexual orientation. It's not a reference to gender in particular. Queer is a process of existing. Okay, thank you for clarifying, Antoine. Was that posted today? So for me, like, reading Octavia Butler is like, it's just weird stuff, and like, I think the first one I read was called Wild Seed, and I've been reading the others there, just helping to like, a lot of it is supernatural from Octavia's work, but just re-envisioning the type of society we exist in, and how we understand our relationship to our internal beauty and power. This all sounds very vague, but I'm trying not to give away any of the themes that, like, or any of the specific themes that I've witnessed. Another author is Toni Morrison. I'm particularly interested in Toni Morrison because the work talks about how to reimagine goodness. I haven't engaged a ton of their work, so I have a lot to still invest in, and I'm very excited about that. But it talks about how, like, if you go into any writing course or something, people are like, okay, so there's the major conflict, and it builds, and then there's a climax, and then, you know, and people will invest perceived bad events, you know, or someone did someone wrong, and then later it's righted, or it's not righted, or, you know, you learn to heal from it, all of these things. But Toni Morrison has brought into my consciousness the idea of writing characters and developing images where there doesn't need to be something wrong in order for you to feel engaged. And I think that's so fundamental that I didn't even understand it the first several times. But how could I engage a book that either didn't have conflict, or the conflict wasn't centered around someone doing wrong to another? I still don't know how to engage that question, but I'm really excited and I feel very fulfilled by it. Toni also writes a ton about what would we write if we just didn't respond to the white gaze, or to masculine gaze, or to others. You know, what would we construct if we weren't responding to those things? And I carry that question in a lot of my work, and yeah, I find it super healing and also just like dope and liberatory. If your privilege allows you to ignore this and be at peace, you owe it to others to take at least a small portion of your privilege and use it to fight this filth. Yeah, at least. At least a small portion. Yeah. That's the thing that's frustrating for me, is that that's what we're asking for, is like, at least. That's where we are in our existence, and in our relationship to how others are engaging our bodies, is we're asking for at least. I don't know how many times I keep asking for at least. At least treat me right in this way. At least give me this. At least don't violate me in these ways. And I think that's why this space is so necessary. because when we're dreaming of at least stop hurting me a little, for those of us who do vegan advocacy and liberation work, and we look at welfarism and we look at what welfare initiatives are doing, asking for chickens, cows, pigs, and others to have, just a slightly better experience before they're murdered. We see how absurd that is very quickly. We can't keep asking for at least. We don't deserve at least. We don't want to have a least existence. We want to have an everything existence where all potentials are open. So I'm not particularly interested in a small portion of the privilege being undone. I need it all to be undone so that I can be affirmed as a whole being. Yep. So I'm just going to leave this space open. I have some food here and I'm getting pretty hungry. One second. One thing I'm really interested in right now is I actually am getting ready to write a story. It's a philosophical horror fiction fantasy novel. It's going to talk a lot about different cultural concepts around desire and agency, and incorporate some fantasy concepts to allow us to explore some of that. And I'm really excited to write works that I'm interested in developing characters that don't need to do wrong to each other, as I mentioned from Toni Morrison, and interested in writing in ways that are expressly queer and expressly femme and expressly non-conforming and expressly black, just dark. I want to reclaim something uncomfortable and not respond to all these different forces that we're all constantly responding to. I want to carve out some space to investigate that. So that's dreaming for me. You have some chips and vegan queso. I'm eating French toast sticks. I don't know if I mentioned that on here. I'm currently eating French toast sticks. And this is my new fave thing. Found some plant-based ones, meaning it's nothing taken from an animal's body. And they are dope. Pretty much every hour of the day. And my housemate also made some dope mac and cheese, so that's nice too. Everything's plant-based. If you're watching this and you're thinking about food, everything that I'm purchasing, eating, engaging, I'm actively thinking about how to stop taking from other animals and using their bodies as commodities. And so all the food that I eat, the clothing that I wear, the products that I use, aim to be conscious of that relationship, and not conscious in the way of sustainably violated or it's not cage-free. I'm not talking happy farms. I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about liberation. I'm talking about not using others' bodies in these ways. So I encourage you to look at that too. And it's super yum. No, it is yum. And I'm about to go heat it up again because it's gotten cold now. Because I talk a lot and haven't been eating. But I encourage anyone watching this, part of dreaming also for me is reclaiming what it means for me to be an animal. And I know that for a lot of black folks, that is an untouchable sort of relationship. We can't look at that question. We think we can't look at that question. And others, we tell them, don't look at that question. Don't connect to me. And I think we're justified in doing that. But I think we're also invested, again, in systems of violence that we don't realize are limiting us as well. So part of my dreaming has been looking at veganism and understanding the types of liberation that it can show me. Um, there are incredible queer black femmes doing huge and compelling community work around community gardening, looking at foodscapes as a whole, where community gardening is not a potential that makes sense in that space, to look at understanding nutrition and understanding workers' rights and chains of production. And for me, dreaming has been allowing myself to investigate some of those questions, like how can I, if I'm not willing to look at the question of how others' bodies are being commodified and reduced, then how in the world can I even begin to ask the question of what a black body is? How can I ask that question if I'm not honestly engaging all of these things that touch on it as well? Like, there's a reason why we are so hurt by being associated with other animals. Just the word animal sound, you can't just call someone an animal in general and it be neutral, but it is neutral, it's a fact. At least as, it's not part of my spiritual perspective that I'm not an animal. And I think for most people in the United States, we're understanding ourselves as animals scientifically, but we emotionally don't engage that. So a huge part of that liberation and dreaming for me has been investigating the ways in which I am an animal and reclaiming that conversation for myself, and allowing myself to dream most deeply in the things that people use to hurt me and have historically used to hurt me, asking questions about those things and seeing how they're linked to my own the violences I experience in my life. So that's something I want to share. I think I'm going to close this space soon, but it says there's 3 people watching. I don't know who you are. I'm glad that you're watching. I'm hoping that this space is engaging you in a way that you're finding something meaningful, and if you're not finding it immediately, then hopefully it develops as you process what you're experiencing here. And if you have questions, I'm going to check one last time my Facebook and everything. I do not see any I just saw someone post on Facebook saying, honestly, I'm really past the point of dialogue. I'm done having to explain my existence. I'm done watching performative allies pat themselves on the back for doing absolutely nothing. I'm done with the post showing that white privilege exists. If you don't value my life, you don't need to be in it. Yeah, that's about where I'm at. That's about where I'm at. I'm trying to hold more space for things that go beyond the white gaze, that go beyond the policing gaze, that go beyond the European gaze and the classist gaze and the cis hetero gaze. Not trying to invest in that, trying to find ways to dream of more potentials for myself. So if you have been watching along, I just want to revisit and contextualize. So a black body is really, I'm going to continue to hold this space, and I'm going to continue to develop parts of this conversation, and they will continue to be available on YouTube through the Intimate Hue page. So you can check out our channel and see this conversation and other conversations taking place. Yeah, I want to understand, how do we move from observing where we are in the world, how our bodies are being understood. In particular, I'm interested in Black and Indigenous experience because I feel a number of ties there. But how do we move from that? How do we move into a space of dreaming? And then once we're dreaming, what are we dreaming of? How can we expand our dreams? How can we believe in our dreams and move in them in a way that we really feel it in our spirit. We live it every day. How can we do those things? And I'll be asking these questions in further conversations and seeing what kinds of healing and what kinds of reclaiming come. And as I find things, I'll share them with you, and I'll hold space for conversations. And I'm always welcoming your insights and your questions. So if you have something to share, please share it here. Comment below. I'm just realizing this will be on YouTube again. Yeah, comment below, share your thoughts, share articles, share videos and movies and books, anything that you're finding engaging, share artwork of other sorts. Yeah, we have to dream for ourselves, and we have to know that there's more, and we have to know that there's a lot more than constantly responding, and we have to know that we have to respond to ourselves at some point. And I think I'm seeing in myself that I want to respond to some of the dreams that I'm carrying more deeply and hold space for those things. So I'm hoping that if you're watching this, you will also take space to hold your dreams closer, to take them more seriously, to push them further, to know that you are worthy of more, to know that you are worthy even if you are not politically active, if you're not out there at a vigil. Do what you need to do to thrive. We have been denied that experience for a very long time in a number of ways, and we continue to invest in that every day. So maybe how can you look at some ways to divest and to really honor yourself as you move through each day? That's the question that I'm asking, and I hope that you'll ask it with me, and I hope that you'll contribute what you find, or not. You don't have to contribute, you just have to honor yourself. So checking. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions in my text or my messages or anything, so I guess I'm going to close this space. Know that this space is not closing permanently. We will be revisiting these questions as things come up. We will not be waiting for major events and news to catch up to our experience and the things that we know. We'll be holding space for each other and honoring each other and loving and caring for each other, witnessing each other every single day as we always do. And we're going to do it more deeply and more honestly, more sincerely. So thank you so much for sharing in this space with me.